Dog interrupts police officer's wedding. What happens next leaves everyone in shock. Sarah Collins stood before the full-length mirror in St. Mary's Church sacristy, her reflection barely recognizable in the flowing white wedding dress. 6 years of chasing down criminals in tactical gear hadn't prepared her for this moment. Max, her Belgian Malinois partner, sat rigidly by her side, his usual calm demeanor replaced by an unmistakable tension that made his ears twitch at every sound. "It's just wedding jitters, boy." Sarah knelt, careful not to wrinkle the dress, and reached to scratch behind his ears, their usual calming ritual. But Max pulled away, dark eyes fixed on the door, a low growl rumbling in his throat. In 6 years of partnership, through gunfights and bomb threats, Sarah had never seen him act this way off duty. The wedding coordinator poked her head in. 5 minutes, Detective Collins." Through the ornate stained glass windows, she could hear the guests settling into their pews. Her fellow officers from the K9 unit had turned out in full dress uniforms, badges gleaming. Michael had insisted on a formal police wedding, embracing every tradition of her law enforcement family. Michael Bennett, technology entrepreneur, the man who'd swept her off her feet 2 years ago after a chance meeting at a charity gala. The man waiting at the altar to become her husband. So why was Max, her most trusted partner, acting like they were walking into a drug bust rather than a wedding? The first notes of the wedding march drifted up from the organ. Sarah took a deep breath and turned to the door. "Come on, Max. Time to give me away." Max rose slowly, his tactical harness replaced today with a formal collar bearing his K9 badge and a bow tie that matched the wedding colors. But his movements were stiff, calculated, the same way he moved when approaching a suspect. The great wooden doors of the church swung open. Sarah stepped into the aisle, Max in perfect heel position beside her. The assembled guests rose, smiling faces turned toward her. At the altar, Michael beamed, handsome in his tailored tuxedo. Sarah felt Max's tension through the ceremonial leash she held. His ears were forward, head high, body coiled like a spring. She'd seen this posture hundreds of times before, in raids, in pursuits, in moments before he'd saved her life by spotting what she couldn't. The walk down the aisle seemed to stretch forever. With each step, Max's growl grew slightly louder, though still too quiet for anyone but Sarah to hear. She found herself cataloguing details with her detective's eye. Michael's slightly too wide smile, the way his best man kept glancing at his watch, the bulge of something under his jacket that couldn't be just a phone. They reached the altar. The priest smiled benevolently and opened his book. "Dearly beloved," Max launched forward, placing himself between Sarah and Michael, his warning growl now a full-throated snarl that echoed off the church's vaulted ceiling. "Max, down!" Sarah commanded, but for the first time in their partnership, Max ignored her. His focus was locked on Michael, who had taken a step back, his face shifting from shock to something harder, colder, an expression Sarah had never seen before. "He's just nervous," Michael said smoothly, but his hand was moving toward the bulge under his jacket. "Maybe we should have him taken outside." Max's snarl deepened, his teeth bared. Sarah had seen that exact posture during their last major bust, when they'd cornered an armed suspect. The training and instincts that had earned her detective's shield kicked in, drowning out the wedding music and the gasps of shocked guests. "Everyone stay calm," she announced in her command voice. Max held his position, but his growl didn't waver. Michael's face had gone blank, that mask of cold calculation still in place. His hand had stopped moving toward whatever was under his jacket, but Sarah could see the calculations running behind his eyes. In that frozen moment, memories flashed through Sarah's mind. Michael's keen interest in her cases, his convenient business trips that coincided with major police operations, the way he always seemed to know things about her work that she hadn't told him. She'd attributed it all to love, to genuine interest in her life, but Max had known. From their first meeting, her partner had maintained a professional distance from Michael that she'd written off as canine jealousy. Now, standing in her wedding dress in a church full of witnesses, Sarah realized she should have trusted her partner's instincts sooner. "Sarah," Michael said softly, reaching toward her. "Don't let him ruin our day. You know me." Max's growl ratcheted up another notch, and Sarah realized with sudden clarity that no, she didn't know Michael at all, but she knew Max, knew the instincts that had saved her life a dozen times, knew that her partner would never act this way without cause. She took a step back. "I think this ceremony needs to be postponed." The look that flashed across Michael's face confirmed everything. In that split second, the mask slipped, revealing something cold and dangerous beneath. His hand twitched toward his jacket again, but he caught himself, aware of the dozens of armed officers in the pews behind them. "Of course," he said smoothly, "if that's what you want. We can reschedule when Max is feeling more cooperative." His smile didn't waver, but his eyes had gone hard as steel. "Later, perhaps. I have a pressing business matter to attend to." Before Sarah could respond, Michael turned and walked quickly toward the side door. Several guests called out in confusion, but Sarah's focus had narrowed to her partner's reaction. Max's growl had risen in pitch, his body trembling with restrained action. "Captain Rodriguez," Sarah called to her commanding officer in the front pew. "I need my service weapon and badge, now." The investigation that would unravel her almost marriage had begun. 2 hours after her almost wedding, Sarah stood in Michael's downtown office, now dressed in tactical pants and her K9 unit polo. Max prowled the space, his nose working systematically across every surface. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Atlanta's skyline, but Sarah's focus was on the scattered signs of hasty departure. An overturned chair, desk drawers left slightly open, a coffee cup still half full and warm to the touch. "He knew we'd come here first," she muttered, examining Michael's sleek desktop computer. The screen displayed only the company logo, endlessly rotating. "He's wiped it clean." Her fingers traced the edge of the keyboard, finding tiny scratches that suggested recent tampering. Max's sudden bark drew her attention. The dog stood rigid by the eastern wall, his tail straight, giving the alert posture she knew meant he'd found something significant. Sarah approached, running her hands along the seemingly solid wall. Years of working with Max had taught her to trust his instincts without question. "What have you got, boy?" Her fingers found it, a slight irregularity in the wallpaper's texture. Pressing firmly, she felt a click, and a panel swung outward, revealing a hidden safe. The door hung open, empty, except for a single flash drive left prominently in the center. The safe itself smelled of burnt paper. Whatever other documents had been here were now nothing but ash. Sarah's phone buzzed. Captain Rodriguez's text was brief. "Background check coming in. Your fiancé doesn't exist before 2018. Birth certificate, college records, business licenses, all elaborate forgeries. We're running facial recognition through international databases." A chill ran down her spine as she stared at the flash drive. It was too perfectly placed, too obvious. Michael, or whatever his real name was, had left it deliberately. But why? "Ma'am!" Officer Chen appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "We've got the security footage from the church. You need to see this." The video showed Michael's swift exit through the side door, but what caught Sarah's attention was his movements just before Max's interruption. As the priest began speaking, Michael's hand had shifted inside his jacket, and the camera angle clearly showed what Sarah had missed, the distinctive outline of a suppressed handgun. "He was armed at our wedding." The words felt foreign in her mouth. "He was planning something. Look at his stance. That's not civilian training." She pointed to his foot positioning. "That's special operations posture." Max whined softly, pressing against her leg in the way he did when he sensed her distress. Sarah scratched his ears, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I know, boy. You tried to tell me. I should have listened sooner." The flash drive seemed to mock her from the safe. Standard procedure said to wait for cyber forensics, but Sarah knew Michael. If he'd left it, he'd meant it specifically for her. Whatever was on it would be time-sensitive. A taunt, a trap, or both. Her laptop booted up quickly. "Cover the door," she ordered Chen, then inserted the drive. A single video file opened automatically. Michael's face filled the screen, but his usual warm smile was gone, replaced by an expression of clinical detachment. When he spoke, his American accent had vanished, replaced by crisp Russian tones. "Dearest Sarah, by now your clever dog has ruined what could have been a clean operation. I admit we didn't account for a K9's ability to detect deception, an oversight we won't repeat. The data I've already collected will be quite useful, but I had hoped to maintain my position longer. Your security protocols, response times, personnel rotations, all that inside knowledge would have been invaluable." Sarah felt her hands clenching into fists. 2 years of memories recolored themselves in her mind, every question about her work, every coincidental appearance at crime scenes, every late-night call she'd taken in his presence. "Don't blame yourself too much," the recording continued. "You're not the first law enforcement officer I've compromised, though you are the first to catch on before marriage. Consider this video a professional courtesy. By the time you see it, I'll be well away. Do try to forget me. Otherwise—" His smile turned predatory. "Well, we may meet again under less pleasant circumstances." The video ended. Sarah sat motionless, her mind racing through implications. Max's low growl matched her rising anger. Outside, thunder rolled across the Atlanta skyline as storm clouds gathered. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Detective Martinez from Cybercrimes. "Sarah, we've got something. Your boy's been busy. Last hour, massive data transfers, encrypted channels, multiple dead drops. Whatever he's planning, it's happening now." Sarah was moving before he finished speaking. "Track those transfers. I want every endpoint, every server. Chen, get me tactical. We're not letting him escape." Max was already at the door, body tensed for action. As Sarah checked her weapon, she caught her reflection in the window. With deliberate movements, she removed Michael's necklace and placed it on his desk. "Ready to hunt, boy?" Max's eager bark echoed through the office. Somewhere in the city, the man she'd almost married was running with who knew what classified information. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated her partner. Sarah's radio crackled. "Detective Collins, we've got a location. Private airstrip north side. Plane filed a flight plan 5 minutes ago. Destination, classified diplomatic flight to Eastern Europe. Time to finish this, Max. Find him." They moved out together, partners in perfect sync, leaving behind the remnants of a life that had been built on lies. The hunt was on, and this time, Sarah wouldn't let her heart blind her to the truth. As Sarah's unmarked police vehicle sped toward the private airstrip, her mind raced back to the first time she met Michael Bennett. Max's head rested on her shoulder from the back seat, his breath steady against her neck, a reminder of what real partnership felt like 2 years ago. The Atlanta Police Foundation's annual gala. Sarah had worn her dress blues, fresh from receiving a commendation for the Fisher case, a human trafficking ring she and Max had helped dismantle. Max had been at the vet for a minor injury, the only time in 6 years he hadn't been by her side at a major event. "Your speech was inspiring," Michael had said, appearing beside her at the bar, especially the part about trust between partners. His smile had seemed so genuine then. "Though I notice your partner isn't here tonight." He'd ordered her favorite whiskey without asking. Now she wondered how long he'd studied her habits before making contact. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter, the memory burning. He'd been fishing for information from the very first moment, testing her defenses when she was alone. "Detective?" Officer Chen's voice brought her back to the present. Traffic cameras picked up his vehicle heading north on I-85. "He's about 10 minutes ahead of us." Rain pelted the windshield as another memory surfaced. Their third date, when Michael had shown up unexpectedly at a crime scene. A major drug bust had gone sideways, and Sarah's team was processing evidence. Max had gone rigid at Michael's approach, forcing Sarah to hold him back. "Just dropping off dinner," Michael had said, holding up a paper bag. His eyes had lingered too long on the evidence bags, on the tactical positioning of the officers. She'd written off Max's reaction as protective instinct, even apologized to Michael for it later. Now she realized Max had been trying to tell her something was wrong from the very beginning. The radio crackled. "All units, be advised. Suspect is considered armed and extremely dangerous. FSB training suspected. Multiple known aliases confirmed. Do not approach without tactical support." Russian intelligence. The pieces were falling into place. The way Michael always seemed to know about police operations before they happened. His convenient business trips coinciding with major busts. The questions about department protocols disguised as pillow talk. A street camera caught his car turning onto Aviation Drive. Sarah followed, lights off, staying just within pursuit distance. Max's posture changed in the back seat. He sensed they were getting close. His training kicked in, body coiled and ready for action. Another memory. 6 months into their relationship, when Michael had moved in, Sarah had come home to find Max's things relegated to the garage. "He needs to learn boundaries," Michael had insisted. "You can't have him sleeping in the bedroom forever." It was the first major fight they'd had. Sarah had won, but now she understood. He'd been trying to separate her from her partner, to weaken their bond. They passed the main airport entrance, heading toward the private hangars. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Captain Rodriguez. Facial recognition match coming through. Multiple aliases across Eastern Europe. Suspected in the deaths of at least 3 other law enforcement officers. All of them women. All of them K9 handlers. Pattern suggests long-term operation targeting K9 units. Sarah's blood ran cold. The engagement ring she'd thrown in her desk drawer suddenly felt like evidence in a serial murder case. Every romantic moment had been calculated. She was never his fiancé. She was his target. Just another in a line of K9 handlers he'd identified and isolated. "There!" Chen pointed to a hangar at the far end of the airstrip. A sleek private jet was waiting, its engines running. Michael's black sedan was parked nearby, empty. The rain had intensified, providing perfect tactical cover. Sarah killed the engine and drew her weapon. "Call for backup. No one moves on the plane until tactical arrives." Max's low growl filled the car. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Sarah caught movement. A figure in a dark suit, walking toward the jet. Michael. Even from this distance, his posture had changed. Gone was the casual charm of the tech entrepreneur. This was a trained operative moving with deadly purpose. She reached back to touch Max's head, a gesture that had steadied them both through countless operations. "Remember when he asked why I trust you more than people, boy?" The dog's ears perked at her whispered words. "Let's show him why." Another memory, the last one. This morning, preparing for what should have been her wedding. Max's increasingly agitated behavior. The way he'd tried to warn her. Not just today, but for 2 years. A K9's instincts versus a human heart's capacity for self-deception. The tactical team's vehicles appeared in her mirrors, lights off, moving into position. Thunder rolled overhead as the jet's engines spooled higher. Sarah checked her weapon. "Chen, coordinate with tactical. Standard containment protocol." She turned to Max, saw the same focused determination in his eyes that she felt in her heart. "Ready to bring down a spy, partner?" Max's answering bark was drowned out by thunder. The rain intensified, sheets of water obscuring the hangar. Sarah opened her door, the familiar weight of her tactical vest grounding her in the present. No more memories. No more second-guessing. Just her partner, and a mission to complete. Through the rain, she caught Michael glancing their way. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. She saw the exact instant he realized his mistake, not in choosing her as a target, but in underestimating the bond between a K9 handler and her partner. "Max," she whispered, "find him." They moved as one into the storm, leaving the past behind with every step. This time, Sarah's heart wasn't clouding her judgment. This time, she was listening to her partner. The private hangar loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against flashes of lightning. Sarah moved in a crouch, Max perfectly in step beside her. Rain hammered against the tarmac, providing cover for their approach. Through her earpiece, she could hear tactical units reporting positions around the perimeter. "Target is approaching the aircraft," Chen's voice crackled in her ear. Two unknown subjects observed inside the cockpit. Sarah pressed herself against the hangar's metal wall, water streaming down her face. Max's ears were forward, his body trembling with controlled energy. Through the gaps in the hangar's metal siding, she could see Michael climbing the jet's stairs. He moved with the fluid grace of a trained operative now, no trace of the charming tech entrepreneur remaining. "All units, hold position," she whispered into her radio. "Wait for my signal." A flash of lightning illuminated the interior of the plane through its windows. Sarah caught glimpses of computer equipment, stacks of hard drives. Not just an escape vehicle, a mobile command center. Michael paused at the top of the stairs, one hand inside his jacket. Even through the rain, Sarah could read his posture. He knew they were there. "Come to see me off, darling?" His voice carried across the tarmac, the fake American accent gone. "I must say, you've ruined quite an operation. 2 years of careful work, undone by a dog's instincts." He turned slowly, revealing the pistol in his hand. "I don't suppose we could discuss this reasonably?" Sarah kept her position, trusting the rain and darkness to conceal her exact location. "It's over, Michael, or whatever your real name is. We know about the other K9 handlers." "Mikhail," he corrected. "And those women. They were less observant than you, less devoted to their partners, easier to isolate." He gestured toward Max with his free hand. "I should have dealt with him first. Standard FSB protocol, actually. My mistake for letting sentiment cloud my judgment." A low growl rumbled in Max's throat. Sarah felt her finger tighten on her trigger. "The data you stole, where is it?" "Everywhere." Mikhail smiled, that same charming smile that had once made her heart race. Now it just made her skin crawl. "Cloud servers across 3 continents, dead drops in 5 cities. The wedding was just, what do you Americans call it, a victory lap." Movement caught Sarah's eye. One of the pilots had emerged from the cockpit, carrying what looked like a laptop bag. More stolen data. She keyed her radio twice, the signal for tactical to hold position. If they moved too soon, evidence would be lost or destroyed. "You're not walking away from this," Sarah said, drawing his attention as she saw Chen's team moving into position behind the plane. "Those other handlers you killed, they had families, partners, people who deserve justice." "Walking away?" Mikhail laughed. "My dear, I'm going to take off right in front of you, because if you try to stop me, I'll have to tell everyone how Detective Sarah Collins leaked classified information to her fiancé. All those nights you thought you were sharing your day with a loving partner." He tapped his temple. "I recorded everything." Sarah felt her face flush with anger and shame. How many operations had she compromised without realizing it? Max shifted beside her, muscles bunching. He'd been tracking the pilot with the laptop, who was now at the base of the stairs. One quick sprint, and they could have both the evidence and a suspect in custody. Mikhail noticed her attention shift. "Ah, still thinking like a cop. Good. That's what made you such a valuable target." He raised his voice. "But perhaps you should be thinking about the explosives instead." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What explosives?" "Insurance policy. C4 planted throughout the hangar, enough to destroy any evidence and anyone nearby. Dead man's switch." He held up his other hand, showing a small transmitter. "So my offer, let me leave with my dignity and you get to live. Try to stop me." He shrugged. "At least you and your dog will be together at the end." Thunder crashed overhead. Sarah ran the scenarios in her head. If he was bluffing, they could take him down now. If he wasn't, Max suddenly went rigid, nose working the air. Sarah recognized that posture. He'd caught a scent. Something beyond Mikhail, beyond the rain and jet fuel, the explosive detection training. Max wasn't just reacting to Mikhail. He was trying to tell her something. Sarah keyed her radio 3 times, the signal for imminent threat. She heard tactical teams beginning to pull back, creating a wider perimeter. But her mind was racing through memories of building entries, bomb threats, training exercises. Max had never given her a false alert. Mikhail was watching her face. "Coming to the right decision. You were never going to let me live," Sarah said quietly. "The other handlers, You eliminated them after getting what you needed. The wedding, the explosives, they were always your exit strategy. Very good. His smile turned cold. Though I'd planned to wait until the honeymoon. Tragic accident abroad. Grieving fiancé returns home to handle your affairs, access your files, tie up loose ends. Max's growl deepened. Sarah felt the vibration through her tactical vest. The rain was easing slightly, and she could now make out more details of the hangar's interior. Something about the shadows was wrong. Then she saw it. Thick cables running along the support beams, disappearing into dark boxes placed at structural points. Not just explosives, shaped charges. But Max wasn't alerting on the hangar. His attention was fixed on the plane itself. The second pilot emerged from the cockpit. Like his colleague, he carried a heavy bag. Unlike his colleague, his movements were stiff, mechanical. Sarah's world narrowed to a single tactical focus. Years of training, of reading Max's signals, of trusting her partner's instincts, crystallized into one crucial realization. The bomb wasn't in the hangar. It was on the plane. "Max," she whispered, "take him." They moved as one into the rain. Max cleared the distance to the plane's stairs in 3 powerful bounds, a black shadow through the rain. Mikhail's eyes widened as he realized his mistake. He'd been watching Sarah, weapon trained on her position, but Max had become invisible in the storm's darkness. The spy brought his gun around, but Max was already airborne. Sarah emerged from cover, her own weapon raised, just as her partner's jaws clamped down on Mikhail's gun arm. The pistol clattered down the metal stairs as man and dog went down together. "Chen, the pilots!" Sarah sprinted toward the plane. The first pilot was already running, laptop bag clutched to his chest. The second remained frozen in the doorway, his own bag held oddly still. A gunshot cracked through the rain. Sarah dove behind the landing gear as Mikhail produced a backup weapon with his free hand. Max maintained his grip, but the spy had managed to get his feet under him. "Explosive devices confirmed in the cargo hold." The radio call was urgent. "Multiple signatures, timer active." Sarah's mind raced. They couldn't shoot, not with live explosives on board, but every second brought them closer to detonation. Through the rain, she saw Chen's team pursuing the fleeing pilot, the laptop bag strap breaking in their grasp, spilling hard drives across the wet tarmac. Mikhail slammed his elbow into Max's head, finally breaking the dog's grip. Blood streamed from his shredded arm as he staggered back against the plane's fuselage. "It's too late." He raised the transmitter. "One press and—" Max charged again, but this time Mikhail was ready. The spy pivoted, using the dog's momentum to send him crashing into the metal stairs. Sarah heard her partner's yelp of pain. "You Americans!" Mikhail's voice was strained but triumphant. "So predictable in your attachments." He aimed his weapon at Max's prone form. "Always going for the heart." Sarah stepped out from behind the landing gear, weapon steady. "Drop it, Mikhail." "Or what?" He kept his gun on Max, finger tight on the trigger. "You'll shoot? With enough Semtex in this plane to level a city block? Think, Sarah. Think like the detective I know you are." She took another step forward into the rain. "I am thinking about the other handlers, about how you killed them to cover your tracks, about how you were going to kill me on our honeymoon." Another step. "But mostly, I'm thinking about what Max figured out before any of us." Mikhail's eyes narrowed. "And what was that?" "The bomb's not in the hangar. It's in your plane, and you're still holding a dead man's switch." The spy's face went blank as he processed her words. His gaze flicked to the second pilot, still standing motionless in the doorway, still holding that oddly rigid bag. "Which means," Sarah continued, "you're not our target. You're our hostage." Max exploded up from the stairs, catching Mikhail's gun arm as the spy tried to switch his aim to the second pilot. Sarah was already moving, taking the stairs 3 at a time. The fake pilot finally reacted, reaching for a weapon, but Sarah's tackle sent them both sprawling into the plane's cabin. The bag flew open, revealing not a bomb, but a complex electronic device. A countermeasure, she realized. Insurance against the very explosives Mikhail had planted. Outside, she heard Max and Mikhail struggling in the rain. The spy was shouting something in Russian. Sarah grabbed the fallen pilot's weapon and spun back toward the door. Mikhail had managed to get to his feet, blood from his mauled arm mixing with rain on the stairs. In one hand, he still gripped the dead man's switch. In the other, his gun wavered between Sarah and Max. "You can't stop it," he snarled. "The data's already gone. In an hour, every operation you've touched will be compromised, every case tainted. Your career is over, Sarah. The only question is how many people you take with you." Max circled the bottom of the stairs, muscles coiled. Sarah kept her weapon trained on Mikhail's chest. "You're forgetting something," she said quietly. "Oh? And what's that?" "I was never the target you should have worried about." She nodded to Max. He was. Max launched himself at Mikhail one final time. The spy's gun barked, the shot going wide as Sarah's partner crashed into him. They went down together, rolling across the wet tarmac. Sarah took her shot. The dead man's switch flew from Mikhail's grasp, skittering across the concrete. Sarah's next shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him away from Max. The spy collapsed, clutching his wound, his features twisted with rage and disbelief. "Impossible!" he gasped. "The explosives were never armed." Sarah kept her weapon trained on him as tactical teams swarmed the area. Max smelled the Semtex, but no detonator compound. "You planted fake bombs to keep us back while you escaped with the real threat. All that stolen data." She smiled grimly. "But my partner's nose doesn't lie." Mikhail's face went slack as comprehension dawned. The wedding, when he started barking. "He wasn't just warning me about you." Sarah knelt to check Max for injuries. "He was alerting on the components you were carrying. Standard protocol for K9 handlers. We train them to recognize electronics and explosives, even when they're well hidden." Chen approached with handcuffs as Max pressed against Sarah's leg, their familiar gesture of solidarity. "The first pilot's in custody," he reported. "We've recovered most of the hard drives. Cyber team's already working on tracking the uploaded data." Sarah nodded, watching as tactical teams secured Mikhail. The spy who had nearly become her husband seemed smaller now, his charm and confidence washed away by the rain. "Detective Collins," Chen gestured to the plane. "We should clear the aircraft. Make sure there aren't any other surprises." "Right." Sarah checked her weapon and turned to Max. "Ready to finish this, partner?" Max's bark echoed through the storm as they climbed the stairs together, leaving the past behind with every step. Ahead lay evidence to process, data to recover, and a network to dismantle. But the most important thing, the trust between a handler and her K9, remained unshaken. And that, Sarah realized, was something no spy could ever fake. 2 weeks after her almost wedding, Sarah sat at her desk reviewing the final case report. Max dozed at her feet, occasionally twitching in his sleep. The K9 unit's office hummed with its usual activity, but her colleagues had given her space these past days, understanding the weight of what she'd been through. Her computer pinged with an incoming message from the FBI's cyber division. The data recovery team had finished their analysis of Mikhail's network. Thanks to the hard drives recovered at the airport, they'd managed to prevent most of the intelligence leaks. A few operations had been compromised, but the damage was far less extensive than they'd feared. Sarah reached down to scratch Max's ears, smiling as he leaned into her touch without waking. On her desk, a framed photo caught her eye. Her K9 Academy graduation, Max sitting proudly beside her. She'd removed all traces of Michael from her office, but this picture remained, a reminder of the partnership that had saved her life in more ways than one. Captain Rodriguez appeared in her doorway, his expression serious. "The interrogation team just finished with Berezovsky. Thought you'd want to hear this directly." Sarah nodded, her hand still resting on Max's head. "How many others?" 5 K9 handlers across 3 countries, all dead. You were going to be number 6. He placed a file on her desk. "The FSB has been targeting K9 units specifically. Dogs can detect things technology can't, explosives, drugs, electronics. Taking out experienced handlers, gathering intel on training methods. They were trying to blind us," Sarah finished. She thought of the other women, their partners. How many had seen the warning signs too late? The good news is your case broke the pattern. Interpol's picking up Mikhail's associates across Europe, the network's falling apart. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Those hard drives you recovered? They contained his entire operational history. Every contact, every dead drop, every mission for the past decade. Max stirred at Sarah's feet, raising his head as if sensing the importance of the conversation. She remembered his reaction at the church, how he'd known something was wrong even before she did. "Sir," she hesitated, "about the information I shared with him. Already handled." Rodriguez waved off her concern. "The review board cleared you completely. Everything you told him was within acceptable parameters for a civilian fiancé. He was fishing for more, but your instincts kept you from crossing any lines." He chuckled. "That, and your partner's apparent dislike of him from day one." Sarah smiled, remembering all the times Max had positioned himself between her and Michael, how he'd refused to warm up to the man despite months of attempted bribes with premium treats. "There is one more thing." Rodriguez pulled an envelope from his jacket. "The K9 Training Division wants to update their protocols based on your case. They're offering you a position, lead instructor for counterintelligence awareness. You and Max would help handlers recognize the warning signs, protect their units from infiltration." Sarah looked down at Max, who had sat up at attention, his dark eyes fixed on her face. How many times had he tried to warn her? How many subtle signals had she missed before finally understanding? "We'll take it," she said, "but first, there's something I need to do." Later that afternoon, Sarah stood in the prison interview room, Max a solid presence beside her. Through the reinforced glass, Mikhail, still wearing bandages from their confrontation, regarded them with a mixture of frustration and curiosity. "Come to gloat." His Russian accent was pronounced now, no trace of the American persona remaining. "Come to thank you, actually." Sarah rested her hand on Max's head. "You taught me something important. About trust, about partnership," she smiled. "About why K9 handlers are so dangerous to people like you." Mikhail's eyes narrowed. "Because of the dog's abilities. Because we learn to trust instincts over appearances, to read signals others miss." She crouched beside Max, meeting him eye to eye. "A dog can't be charmed or manipulated, can't be bought or fooled by a friendly smile. They see the truth beneath the lies. And now you'll teach others to do the same." It wasn't a question. Mikhail leaned back, his handcuffs clinking. "I suppose I failed my mission thoroughly." "On the contrary," Sarah stood, squeezing Max's favorite tennis ball in her pocket. "You helped us more than you know. Every handler I train, every K9 unit I prepare, they'll be stronger because of what you tried to do." She turned to leave, but Mikhail called after her. "One thing I never understood. That morning at the church. What finally made you trust his warning over your heart?" Sarah paused at the door, remembering the moment everything had changed. "Simple. In 6 years of partnership, Max had never steered me wrong. In 2 years of romance, you'd never told me the truth." She smiled at her partner. "Wasn't really a choice at all." Outside the prison, storm clouds were gathering again. Sarah pulled Max's ball from her pocket, watching his eyes light up with anticipation. Sometimes the most complex problems had the simplest solutions. Sometimes the deepest truths came down to the unshakable bond between a handler and her dog. "Come on, partner!" She tossed the ball across the prison parking lot, laughing as Max bounded after it. "Let's go help others learn what you've been trying to teach me all along." Max returned with the ball, tail wagging, ready as always for whatever came next. And Sarah knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd never doubt his instincts again. After all, that's what real partners were for.